Thank you for joining us. And I'm Dennis Williams from CashMap Consulting. And thank you for taking the time to come back and tune in to Money Talk Viewpoint. And it's my pleasure to welcome back Mr. Charles Dent from Xelantt Profit Strategies. Last time we were together, last month, we were talking about being able to move businesses that had been excellent in their startup, but as they now begin to evolve, they've plateaued. And Charles is here using 3 simple points that he made, and we'll let him restate those again, just for us to kind of launch the discussion when we move to point number 2, as what those 3 points are that are applicable to any business of any size, in which that's what he specializes in helping businesses do. Charles, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Dennis. It's great to be back and enjoyed the first round and looking forward to this one as well. And again, I'm Charles Dents from Xelantt Profit Strategists. I'm the CEO and founder. And clients ask me to transform their business with our AI enhanced strategies. And to Dennis's point, 3 pillars that we like to focus on is implementation of tailored business strategies, and then establishing efficient operations, and then essentially exceeding current growth limitations that businesses tend to run into when they plateau.
So since we covered all 3 last week, but just for a real quick overview of number 1, just touch on that first, and then we're going to zero in on number 2 as relates to building efficient, scalable operations is where we want to spend time today.
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to implementing a tailored business strategy, depends on where the business is, right? So if they're struggling, if they're plateaued and they're struggling with their marketing, we tailor marketing strategies that will enable them to get in front of the right clientele, the right customer, the right client. Or we may work with them in terms of their sales strategies. They may be limited on their ability to actually sell, and marketing and sales are different. And a lot of times when companies reach a certain level of 25 employees or more, they need to have someone who has wearing 2 different hats. Someone who does marketing, someone who does sales, and typically not the same person. So that it begins to scale from that perspective. And then, as you mentioned, getting into efficient operations, that is very important to have all the right things in place in order to be efficient.
So how difficult is it to make that transition to moving to scalable operations? What's the biggest barrier?
It can be very difficult for a lot of business owners. And the reason is because a lot of times they enter in as an entrepreneur with a great business idea that they have and something that's needed in the marketplace, and they're very passionate about it, and they hold it very tight to the vest, all of the IP that comes with it. So at some point, they need to transition from being an entrepreneur to being a leader. And what a leader does is delegate. And they have to be willing to let go of the reins of the things that they're so passionate about, and then start running their company as a business. And running their company as a business means that they are delegating out the daily activities that generate revenue for the company. What makes that difficult, Dennis, is for most business owners and entrepreneurs, they are so passionate about what they do. They hold on to it, and they become the hub in the spoke, right? The hub in the wheel, and where the spokes are not being fed as they should be, but they're the hub. Everything centers around them. And ultimately what that does is it prevents growth, because now that business owner, that entrepreneur, they're now a bottleneck. and they may not recognize that they're a bottleneck or accept the fact that they're a bottleneck.
Well, okay, so I got to push back a little bit.
Okay.
And perhaps there's an element here that they also struggle with. And myself being a former CFO, there's that issue as well of chicken or the egg, of if I'm going to be putting more money out, but yet I'm not sure what I'm going to get back, because especially if you're talking about marketing, frequently that's one of those things that seem really kind of soft and squishy, and you're not sure what you're going to get for your investment. Do you run into that as one of the hurdles?
Absolutely. And history says that many companies have invested in marketing and it just becomes a black hole. They get nothing out of it. And a lot of times there's some fundamental reasons why, in my opinion. That is that they're unclear on their vision, they're unclear on their mission, they're unclear on what their core offerings are. And they're also unclear from the perspective of what is the thing that makes them different. I couldn't get the word out. That differentiates them from their competitors. What's that thing that makes them different? And if they don't know how to put all of those things together, all four of those, and tie them together so that they're seamless, then their marketing will not be as concise and specific as it needs to be. Because now what they probably don't have, they don't have a unique selling proposition that aligns to those things. They don't have a unique value proposition that indicates the exact value that they deliver. And the messaging just may simply be wrong, because from a messaging standpoint, a client or a prospect, they need to understand that you have an idea, as a company, have an idea what the problem is they're trying to solve. And not only do you have an idea, but you also have a solution for that problem. And many times when it comes to marketing, those things are not clear. And so ultimately, a lot of money is just burnt and with no return on investment.
Well, isn't one of the problems also is that perhaps your target audience that you thought you had is actually not what it really is? And so you
Mhm.
also have this challenge of identifying just what the right message ought to be, even though you know what your product is, but you haven't done a great job at getting into the head of that right customer so that you can actually deliver it. So do you see a lot of clashing there as far as preventing a marketing person to come on board, or when they do come on board, being able to actually get all the pistons running so that they're all on the same page?
You're absolutely spot on. And that's the whole purpose of understanding your vision, your mission, your core offering. Because if you don't know your core offering and who you're offering it to, then you're going to run into a problem, because now you're probably talking to the wrong prospect. You're talking to the wrong potential customer, the wrong potential client. And if you're not talking to the right one, then you're not going to attract the right one.
Right. Right.
So yeah, you're spot on with that. Absolutely.
So then while this is happening, your core number two is, of course, efficient operations. So what's happening at the same time?
Well, at the same time, you typically have not just the business owner, but those who are working in that company. And we're talking again, companies 25 employees or more, and you have a pro and a con. The pro is you have some experts that are helping you run your business. The con is those experts typically have all the knowledge is in here of what they do and how they get the results that they get. So what has to happen, and this is the efficiency part of operations, and this for any business, and that is having SOPs for everything. So when you have standard operating procedures, that allows that company to become efficient. And this is the way I like to look at it. And so there's a couple of ways that I talk to clients about. And that is not only do they become efficient, but they position themselves from a hiring standpoint. So they have all the pillars in place in terms of the vision, mission, their core offerings, their what makes them different, their differentiators, and the messaging that comes along with that. That also helps them in their ability to hire the right people, right? So when they hire the right people, now they actually have procedures in place to help from a training standpoint and also from an efficiency and repeatability standpoint. And so from that perspective, I like to talk to my clients about having SOPs in place that essentially allows them to operate not unlike a franchise. Not saying they're a franchise. I'm saying they have repeatable processes, repeatable procedures that are in place that you get the same result and you get to that result the same way. And that doesn't mean that those SOPs can't be improved. It doesn't mean that there's not innovation. It just means that you're on a track of being able to do things in a repeatable fashion. And when you can repeat it, you become highly efficient in doing so.
As a former HR executive myself, this kind of resonates in my head of what you're saying. And the other item that I would ask as a part of that is, does that include when you bring a new person on board, having performance benchmarks at key points as that new employee comes on board, so there's just crystal clear clarity of what's expected by when, so the trainer and the trainee are both laser focused on where they are and where they're going next.
Yes, for sure. The worst thing that can happen with a new employee, they're just sitting around trying to figure out what to do next. And that happens way too often. And, it's the same thing. You talk about first impressions. Well, maybe the interview process was great. But when that new employee starts and they realize, wait a minute, there's something missing here. I'm just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I don't know what to do next. Even the person that's training them, they don't know where to lead them and how to train them. And by having everything buttoned up, then there is an expectation as well as some guardrails and milestones that you're able to put in place in order to train those new employees and understand where they should be and when they should be there and what type of results they should be producing. And it becomes crystal clear also from the standpoint of being able to set that employee's objectives so that the employee understands exactly what's expected of them, when it's expected, and what type of results are expected. So yeah, it's all of it ties together, and that's the efficiency part.
So you've given us a mouthful. The question that I have is, how long does this take? Do you also run into the problem of the owner who wants everything perfect, getting bogged down into analysis paralysis because it's not absolutely perfect the way they want to do it, so then they're not doing anything?
Yeah, and you have to set expectations. It's because it's not about perfection. It's about productivity. So perfection is the wrong P. The P word here is productivity. And when you get bogged down in perfectionism, there is no progress being made because it never will be perfect.
How often do you see that? Is that a frequent issue? Or if you were looking at this subject in general, what would you say is probably the biggest speed bump you end up running into that just grinds the process down to a halt?
Well, certainly perfectionism is one of those. The other is the unclear, and it goes back in what we mentioned earlier, but it's unclear expectations.
Okay.
And when there are unclear expectations, I, as an new employee, I may be going down one path. However, my my reporting manager may have a totally different idea, but my reporting manager didn't make it clear. And now we have a divergence in our expectations. And then ultimately what that means is that there's poor communication. So you have a leader who does not know how to communicate clearly. And you have an employee who, as a new employee, they're probably a little bit reluctant to challenge that their new manager, their new direct report. And because of that, then they are divergent in what they're targeting as outcomes. But the communication piece may be, Dennis, the number one issue that stands in the way of efficiency.
Okay, so that's a big one. So the elements of clarity of communication, like for example, I'll give you one that I used to use in my organization, was I was really clear that we had an open door policy, so that if there was something that was important to the process and there was a disagreement with the immediate supervisor, that they knew they could elevate it for an open discussion because we're all in this together. But the one rule I had was communicate and saying that this was a biggie, that I'd like to have input from our superior. So it was set up front. So there was no reason for any sense that somebody was going behind somebody's back.
Yeah.
What are some of the elements to create that kind of, I mean, some people find it threatening, but what do you tell your clients?
What I tell them is if we have an open door conversation, what does open door mean? And what's the atmosphere has been set? Because if the atmosphere is one that, or the environment, the culture, if it's one that says, okay, there's an open door, but if I go through that open door, I'm getting my head chopped off,
Right.
then open door doesn't mean anything. There's nothing positive about open door. So you have to be very definitive and intentional about what open door means. So does open door mean that I can come in and have an open discussion with you? Does it mean that if I come in with a situation, a challenge, a problem, whatever it is, are you expecting me as an employee to already have a potential solution? And we just need to talk through that solution so that we can level set on whether or not that solution is a good one, or do we need to rethink it, or can you give me some direction? What does open door mean? So open door has to come with has to be, particularly this day and time, it has to be pretty clear on what the expectation is if I come to my manager
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to talk about whatever it may be. It could be a challenge I'm having. It could be a problem I'm having. It could be an interaction with another employee that I'm dealing with. And is my manager open to having a transparent conversation in order to come up with a solution and not hold anything against me that will come back to bite me later.
Okay.
It truly has to be that door has to be one that's transparent.
So in this area of efficient operations, I've heard you identify three things so far in our conversation. Number one, the development of standing operating procedures. Number two, in which they don't have to be perfect. Number two is the necessity of clarity for all parts of the organization, which are kind of tightly tied to standard operating procedures. And third is the importance of the culture that's being developed. And I guess I did think of one more, and that was the whole item of importance of mission and vision on developing an effective marketing and sales team. Is that a good summary of kind of what we've talked about?
Yeah, that's a perfect summary. Yeah.
Is that a good summary? Okay. And so that would be all under the umbrella of item number two that you identified earlier on in the presentation.
Yes.
So we're kind of beginning to wrap up. So when we get together next month again, what's going to be our focal point for the next bit of wisdom tidbits from Charles Dents?
The next one that will be is strategies to exceed current growth limitations.
Okay.
And the things we talked about so far, yeah, they absolutely inhibit growth. But there's some more things that are maybe even more telling and even more impactful. And the reason I say that is because where we want to go with any business is how do we exponentially grow revenue? And that's what we need to talk about next.
Okay. So if somebody wants to get back in touch with you to zero in on these items, these four items we talked about this morning, how do they do that, Charles?
Well, the easiest way is to contact me through our company website, which is, I believe it's right here, our company website. So Xelantt.com, www.xelantt.com. And so that's the easiest way to schedule a pre-consultation with me. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look me up as Charles Dents, Dents. And, certainly happy to connect that way as well.
All right. Fantastic. And for our viewers, I again want to thank you for joining us. And again, I'm Dennis Williams. And similarly, if you'd like to follow up for some additional innovative approaches to cash management strategies that I can guarantee you've never heard before, that will keep money in your pocket, be it an individual or a business, I'll just give you my email address is Dennis@cashmapconsulting.com, and my website address is www.cashmapapp.com. And we will look forward to seeing you next month on the 10th.
I look forward to it. Yeah, it'll be a blast.
It's been great getting to know you and getting your input on these really important issues for businesses. So we'll do it again next month.
Thank you, Dennis.
All right.